Okay, guys, today we're going to be talking about the next literary element that we're going to be covering and using in class, and that is the idea of the plot diagram. It's important to understand that the events of a story need to happen in a specific order. The order of these events take place along what we call the plot diagram. In the next few moments, we're going to discuss the five parts of the plot diagram, what we need to know about each one, and the order that they should be used in. So, just like following directions for something that you're building or following Google Map directions, if a step is left out or a turn while driving is skipped, the final result will not be what you want, or you might not end up where you want to be. This is very comparable to the stories we read. If an author leaves out a step of the plot diagram in their story, the story doesn't pack the punch that the author wants it to, or to us as the reader, it feels like something's missing. It's also important that they take place in order. The first part of the plot diagram that we come to is called the exposition. It is the beginning of the story, and at this time, three important things happen for us as readers. First, the characters are introduced. This is key because we need to get to know them and the role they play in the story. It's when we become attached to certain characters because of what it seems like they're going to be going through, or maybe something that we can connect with them or identify with that character with. Secondly, we learn about the setting of the story. As readers, this is important to learn about because, as we've discussed before, it will play a major role in the story, and it can also impact the characters that we're reading about. Finally, we're introduced to the main conflict of the story. We need to know early in the story what the main conflict is so we're aware of it when it's been resolved and how it helps move the events of the story along. The next step in the plot diagram, the second step, is called rising action. If you've ever been shown a picture of the plot diagram, it could have been shown to you like this: a triangle with a line coming off either side. The problem with this is it doesn't accurately show how rising action is important to our story and adds a lot to it. Rising action should really be more accurately shown as a jagged line, as you see here in the red box. Each up and down is depicting the highs and lows of the events that the character goes through. When one problem is solved, another seems to pop up. This is what keeps us intrigued and interested as readers in a story. When you're reading a book and you have one that's a real page turner and you just can't stop reading, and before you know it, you're five chapters in when you planned on really just reading two at that time, is usually thanks to rising action. The third and middle part of the plot diagram is called the climax. This is what the entire story revolves around. It's what we've been working to as readers and the characters have been trying to solve. Like the drawing shows with the direction of the lines, this is the turning point of the story. Everything we've been working towards comes down to this. It's usually when the main character has finally has to deal with the central conflict of the story. No more hiding from it or avoiding it. It's because of this encounter that our main character is changed in some way, either good or bad, right or wrong, even in dramatic situations, whether the character lives or dies. That character is not the same after the climax of the story. Now, if a story ended after the climax, there'd be a lot of angry readers. They'd feel cheated or confused or lost. As readers, we need closure and we need our questions answered. This is what the fourth step of the plot diagram helps with, and is called falling action. This is where all the loose ends are tied up. For example, are you wondering if a character survived? You'll probably find out in this part of the story. Are you curious if they reached their destination? The falling action will typically reveal that. Did those two characters at the beginning of the story end up falling in love? Here's where you'll probably know the answer to that question. By the end of this section of the plot diagram, problems and the turning point of the story will be resolved and allow us to head to the end of our story. Finally, we come to the fifth and final part of the plot diagram, the resolution. The riding off into the sunset moment of the story. The part that allows you to close the book with peace of mind or excitement for the next book in that series. The story comes to a reasonable ending. That means an ending that fits with everything else that has happened so far in the story. You'll notice there in bold blue letters, it does not say acceptable ending. It also doesn't say enjoyable ending. You, as the reader, may hate the ending of that story because you wanted it to somehow end differently. But all the loose ends are tied up and there are no more questions left to ask. And it fits with everything that's happened in the story you've read. So that makes it a reasonable ending. So if you were to divide up the plot diagram into three parts, you'd probably say that your exposition and your rising action would be the beginning of the story. Your climax would be the middle of your story. And the falling action and resolution would be the end. As we started by saying, if you left out any of these five parts, it could seriously affect the story as a whole.